is wonderful, counting is marvelous, counting's terrific, and how.
Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and welcome back, finally, to Counting Kryptofreaks. Yeah, not kidding, it's back, episode to episode, as often as humanly possible. This is a show that I canceled a whopping year and a half ago, and I mean officially canceled. I was done. I had no intention of ever bringing this back again. And it's just been eaten at me ever since then. I am bringing this back by popular demand. I want to say thanks so much to all of the Counting Kryptofreaks fans and Smallville fans, because those aren't always the same people, who have sent me messages and left comments saying, hey Cap, we really missed that show. You've got to bring it back again at some point in some form, and I'm going to do it as much as humanly possible. I can't promise how long it's going to take me to finally finish the show. I can't promise that it won't go on hiatus again, but I'm going to barrel forward. I'm going to not think too much about all of that. I'm not going to think too much about the relevance or lack thereof of this show now after it's been off the air for 10 years. This is its 20th anniversary. I guess it's more relevant right now than it has been in a long time, because it is a big anniversary, and there are a lot of people kind of finding their interest in the show again. We've had an animated series that's been announced by Michael Rosenbaum and by Tom Welling, and that's really interesting. I might be able to do more Counting Kryptofreaks if I finally get there on new material, which is just absolutely wild, and not just the comics. And I should say I have reviewed some of Season 11 now, trade by trade, and I don't know if I'm going to revisit that issue to issue when I get finished with everything, but again, that's thinking way far ahead. I started Season 3, at least the commentary side, a couple of years ago. The scripted stuff was even before that, and anyway, it's just really exciting to finally be back doing this, and it's happening because of you guys who asked for it, and again, I really missed it, but if I didn't think there was enough interest, I certainly would have not come back. I hate to leave things unfinished, but it's difficult to prioritize a thing that nobody but me cares about. So thanks so much to you guys, and I really hope you enjoy it. Today, we're going to tackle everybody's favorite Season 3 episode. This is so long awaited for the last 2 years, or year and a half. By the way, January of 2020 is the last time I talked about this show. So I've not done an episode, or at least on Counting Kryptofreaks. I guess I've done a couple of commentaries outside of the show, out of school, as it were, since then. But Counting Kryptofreaks, it's been January, so before COVID even started. Today I'm going to tackle Velocity. Yeah, I was kidding. Nobody's favorite episode, or at least I really doubt it. This is an episode that was supposed to be kind of a major episode of the season that Goff and Miller seemed to really like and thought that it would be a big hit, and it was the opposite of that. This is a somewhat infamous and maligned episode by a lot of fans. People don't like how Pete Ross is treated in this episode, and just the really typical kind of cookie-cutter plot with the car racing ring and the throwing a race and all of that. This has so been there, done that with a lot of sports movies and that kind of thing. And I think there was a lot of disappointment that Pete Ross didn't get more to do this season, and that his one big character episode, he was basically made kind of the Kryptofreak. We have sort of a main character Kryptofreak this episode, even though he doesn't get powers. It's difficult not to put him in that category. I wouldn't officially do that. He doesn't get powers, but he essentially fills that role, or at least he partners that role with his antagonist in this episode, Dante, who gives him the kryptonite in the first place. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There's maybe not enough meat in this episode to talk too much about it outside of watching it. But anyway, Goff and Miller we're, like I said, kind of shocked that people didn't like this episode, and we'll talk about that and more. Let's go ahead and get right into it. If you want to watch it with me, and I encourage you to do that, you can get out your DVDs. There's a Blu-ray set that is about to come out that you may or may not have by the time you see this episode. I don't know if I'm going to get that this year, but I would like to get my hands on that. It looks like a really pretty set. I think there's some new special features. Yeah, lots of Smallville stuff this year. It's really cool they did something like that for the anniversary. So that's awesome. But anyway, you can do that, or you can watch Hulu, which is the way I'm doing it. And I'm doing the commercial-free version, so I won't give you spots to stop if you're watching it with commercials. So try to watch it without commercials if at all possible. And let's go ahead and get right into it. Here we go. Everybody, please press play. We're into episode 13 of season 3. So almost the halfway point, right around the halfway point. Here we go. Everybody, please press play right now. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, another of Smallville's constant, never-ending hospital scenes. They rely on these a lot. When last we left Jonathan Kent and his family, he had gotten in a heart attack in a scene that I remembered for whatever reason being the opening of an episode, but it actually is a cliffhanger at the end of Hereafter, I believe, the previous episode. And I'm rusty. It's been a long time, so hopefully I don't get too many of my facts wrong, but I've not gone back and rewatched everything. Of course, up to this, I did refresh myself a little bit reading about a couple of episodes just to remember just where we are. But anyway, so Jonathan has gotten a heart attack because that's how he's paying for the powers he got from Jor-El in order to get Clark back from Metropolis. We're finally dealing with that whole thing. And I guess in something of a superficial way, it's nice that there are consequences for that. He's going to be dealing with that for the next couple of seasons. And I almost said spoiler alert. I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but I'm sure most of you guys know what happens to Jonathan Kent a couple of seasons after this. A lot of recapping happening here in the scene, in case you haven't seen the previous episode or some of the other episodes at the beginning of the season dealing with this situation. This is a weird episode because it's handled with a lot of kind of gravitas, for lack of a better word, and some pathos, and the material is just not good enough on the page for the production value and the way that the episode is shot and handled. I think it's a wonderfully well-directed episode. I think it's moody. It's got a nice sense of atmosphere, but the story is just not quite there. And again, I don't like the way Pete Ross is thrown under the bus. I'm in the camp of this was a big misstep for that character. And it's weird because he comes off like a guest star more than he does a main supporting character who's finally getting an episode. So immediately you can tell that that is Kryptonite powering that car. We all know where this is going. It feels like we're just dipping into a lottery, dipping into a hat, and pulling out pieces of paper saying different themes we've not done yet with Kryptonite. There's just not a lot left after you've done Snow Globe. So it's time finally to do car racing. And oh, we didn't see that coming. Here comes Pete Ross. And maybe you didn't see that coming, but I don't think it's an exciting reveal. I remember feeling let down by that because I think a lot of the episode is predictable as soon as we get this shot. I don't even need the exposition to explain what Pete is doing there, why he's driving that car, what's going on. The scene certainly visually does a good enough job of giving me all of that, but I also don't need that explained because, again, it just feels like a really typical situation that you've seen in lots of other movies and things. The show likes to rip off popular, especially recent movies. A little later on, we're going to get the Saw episode. We had one earlier this season, I think, unless we haven't gotten to it yet. I can't remember. oh no, I think it's next season maybe, the episode where they just straight up rip off Flatliners. And here we're doing Fast and the Furious. I said recent stuff. Flatliners was a decade before this, of course, but we do it with a lot of stuff that had just come out recently. Got some more Ian Somerhalder here in a subplot that I am just frankly not interested in, and it's going to be hard to talk over those scenes. I think I've said that before. He, of course, is an actor who goes on to be a main character in Lost and then Vampire Diaries for seasons and seasons. And one of the 2 or 3 kind of stalker boyfriends, ultimately for Lana, like a season-long boyfriend that turns into a scary bad guy character. So we break the formula sort of in the sense that we don't have a straight-on Kryptofreak this episode, but that's only a technicality. Nobody has a superpower, but the car does. Look at that guy's jacket. He's got the things that my later seasons Smallville jacket or Clark jacket has. So I was shocked when I first saw this that we don't get a car wreck at the beginning of this episode. It seems like, in a weird way, we're trying to subvert expectations by ultimately just following the main from season 1 Smallville formula all the way to the letter, but just not doing all the tropes until a little bit later. Go, oh, you thought we'd do a car wreck, right? And then right at the end, we're gonna have a big car wreck. You know, I'm like, you didn't think we were gonna have any Kryptofreaks, right? Well, the car is kind of a Kryptofreak. So the big misstep here with Pete, I don't even think, is that he is doing the underground car racing thing. And that it's illegal and he should be better than that. I really don't mind this idea that he is living under Clark's shadow and wishes that he could feel like Clark. I think the episode is a little bit confused about his motivations. How much of it is it, here's that subplot I don't care about. This guy is dead, he was brought back to life with kryptonite, that's what's going on right now. Anyway, so it seems a little bit confused about his motivations. Is Pete doing this because he wants the kind of fame and fortune that he thinks Clark could get if only he would let people know about his powers? Does he wish he was getting attention? Or does he just want to feel the rush that Clark must get having superpowers? And there's a scene a little bit later where he'll say, I'm doing this because I want to feel like you feel all the time. And a lot of that is about adoration, which Clark doesn't get because people don't know about his powers. He tries to do this selflessly. Of course, he has this reputation for saving people, of course, but beyond that, there's a lot of saves and stuff that he does that nobody ever knows about, and nobody's throwing him ticker tape parades or anything, which is the kind of thing that Pete seems to want. He thinks it'll bring him, glory, and he'll be able to get girls, everything beyond just the rush that Clark feels getting to use his superpowers. So it's a little confused about that, but I don't mind, and I think I like a little bit the idea that Pete is looking for some way to feel like Clark. And I like the idea that the show is directly addressing the fact that he's so in the background and that he is isolated from the rest of the cast. Like, if that has to happen, if they can't figure out what to do with him, maybe the ticket is make his character about that, about the reasons that he's left out. Maybe we can come to something interesting from that. Ultimately, that does not happen, unfortunately. Chloe right now is investigating this whole thing with Ian Somerhalder's character, trying to figure out who he really is, and the whole coming back from the dead thing, and all of that. I don't have much to comment on with this, except we're just trying to do some detective investigating stuff, dealing with kryptonite and its connection ultimately to Clark and his powers and all of that, because the show wants to be X-Files as much or more than it wants to be anything else. Goff and Miller in the companions talk a surprising amount about horror, as if this is supposed to be a horror show in the first place. And so, if it's an X-Files episode, it has to have those kind of intense thriller scenes, and then it has to have these scenes where we're investigating something. But I think the real misstep with the Pete arc is that it doesn't open with the big mistake he makes with Dante in the first place. Where he gets thrown under the bus is that Clark finds out about it, he doesn't listen at all to Clark, and he keeps just being completely unreasonable. And I think that's where he gets out of character, and I have a hard time sympathizing with him. I appreciate his initial reason for doing this in his plight a little bit, but Clark has a really good point in the way that he approaches Pete here. Like, I just think that we go too far in an unsympathetic direction at the very beginning. He is really dangerous at the beginning, and with his car, he puts Clark's mother in danger, and he says, "No, I've got it. I know how to drive these cars. I'm in complete control. There's no reason to worry." Clark proves that that's not really the case when he barely is able to slow down and stop before he hits Clark, and he even admits that he almost hit him. And that should be proof enough that this is a bad idea to him. And then, so he's going to refuse to listen to Clark at all. He's going to continue doing what he's doing, and then ultimately, and he's going to be cocky, he's in over his head, he's going to get in that kind of Jack Murdoch situation of being told to throw a race so that the main guy running this, Dante, can cheat and make a lot of money, and it's going to go exactly where you would expect it would go, and it becomes kind of organized crime drama. What if the episode just opened with all of that? What if Pete came to Clark and said, "Okay, look, I screwed up. I've been doing this underground racing thing to feel alive, to get to feel like you, and I went too far because I decided that I was a superhero like you, and that I could," not that he calls himself a superhero, of course, but that I could do anything, and this is interesting too, and in a way, he could even claim, "I have the same values you do, Clark. Like, I know that what I did in getting in this illegal thing is technically wrong, but I also am not a cheater. And you don't believe in cheating either, in truth and justice. I shouldn't cheat in order to, help this guy make a lot of money. So I did the right thing there." That would have been an interesting argument to bring up, too. But I think it would be a lot more sympathetic if it opens with, he comes to Clark, "Look, I have a problem. I'm the victim this time, but I brought it upon myself." And it would be probably a less tragic ending. And I guess I kind of appreciate the guts the episode has for ending on a downer like that. But again, it feels like it's throwing Pete under the bus because it doesn't know what to do with him, and it's got to make him the antagonist of the episode just to give him something to do. And Goff or Miller won in the companion again, make this weird claim that what this proved to them is that nobody cares about Pete. Now, I think people didn't like it because they wanted to care about Pete, and it made them dislike him more, or maybe dislike him in the first place. I think what it proves to all of us is that you guys didn't care about Pete. You just couldn't figure out what to do with him. And this was not it. That is made further clear. Now, this is not fair because Goff and Miller are gone at this point, I think, but I think it's season 8 when he finally will come back and get one more episode, and he is a straight-up Kryptofreak there. I mean, they really didn't have any inspiration at all for what to do with this character. It's really weird just how much of this kind of corruption happens in Smallville. You'd think that it was a big city. You'd think you were in Metropolis. Not that Metropolis is supposed to be a crime-ridden city, but any big city is going to have, some above-board stuff going on. Gotham Miller said that they came up with this episode because this kind of late-night street racing stuff was happening in Vancouver, around where they were shooting, and they said that it's a thing, and maybe it's hard to relate to just because that's not a thing that I knew about, and it doesn't seem to happen around where I live, but he says that, or they said that it's a thing that happens in a lot of small towns. And that's a thing I didn't really realize. Back then, that was apparently a big problem. I don't know if it is now. But also, the show can't decide how small the town is. So even if you're saying this is, you just got kids late at night who are looking for something to do and a way to make a buck, so they, they bet on street racing, on illegal street racing. Okay. But the problem is, you could just as easily tell this story, and it would feel more natural to tell this story in a big city, and you cannot decide how big your town is. So once again, we're trying to have our cake and eat it too, and we're saying, no, this is realistic because it's a small town. Well, you keep going back and forth on the size of the place. And when you look at everything stacked on top of itself, it just seems like there's way too much crime in Smallville. Although I suppose you can just say that, you just chalk all that up to kryptonite and say that the meteor rock having 1,000 different principles of stuff you can do with it and stuff that it can do to you ends up just creating this monster of a town. But it plays so much like just episode to episode a way to contrive something to happen. It never feels like we're seeing the forest for the trees. Very rarely does it feel like we're getting a good sense of the overall culture that is creating. Sometimes you'll see, you'll have a conversation or you'll see a newspaper or something where somebody's commenting on just the sheer amount of, death and corruption that happens in the city because of that. But I don't think that the show itself very often has a real clear picture of that. One question I have with drag racing is how Dante gets away with the kryptonite boost with other people racing him or Pete or whoever is using that stuff and not realizing it. It seems really obvious that something is going on beyond their driving ability, and it's also absurd that Pete keeps talking about how great he is at driving and how well he can handle the cars. I mean, I get that he's not getting into a lot of wrecks and stuff, and he must be good at driving at high velocity and stuff like that, but it also seems like he thinks that he's winning more because he's good at driving than because of the kryptonite. And I just would not think that would be all that sustainable. We've got all these awkward scenes over and over again with Clark and Lana, and a lot of that is because we're at a standstill right now with their relationship, where they keep going back and forth. Finally, at the moment, if memory serves from things I've talked about in the past, a lot of it is because of things that Clark did when he was under the influence of red kryptonite or something else, and he's not, able to, or just talking to Lana when even he could about what happened, and so she's blaming him for things that may be his fault, or it's a gray area how much of his fault they are. And they can't be together now. This would be a really good time to finally just let her know the secret and move forward with that, especially if you're going to get rid of Pete at the end of the season, where you don't have the confidant anymore. Instead of going a whole 6 seasons with the off again, on again, will they, won't they, he's got to keep his secret, and we're not allowed to progress anything forward. It's a big problem with this show, is hanging on to status quo. Arbitrarily, in my opinion. I don't think that this is a series where as soon as she finds out, people stop watching. And it might, in fact, be the opposite. It might be that because we wouldn't let them have a relationship and we keep backtracking where we get with their relationship, you know, like getting to a place and then regressing again with both of them in that relationship, that got people less interested and they started dropping off. Middle of the season, ratings started to wane quite a bit. I'm not sure how well they picked up in the next season. That's the thing I'll try to look into. That girl was carrying a really big stuffed something. Unicorn, maybe? I'm not sure what that was. The best written stuff in this episode, like so often, and also, you know, good acting helps with John Schneider, is the stuff about the moral gray areas. How can you hold to the principles of Superman when a friend or a family member that you really care about, their life is at stake and in danger? And I really like that at the end, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I really like that at the end of this episode, Jonathan Kent doesn't say, ends never justify the means. You have to always hold to your principles. You have to always do the right thing no matter what is at stake. He says, you do the best you can minute to minute, and it's good enough. He basically says it's good enough that you're thinking about that you're worried about it. That sometimes you do have to bend the rules a little bit for a friend. There's no way around it. Life is filled with shades of gray. And I love dealing with that with a Superman thing. I also, and I meant to comment on this earlier, when he stops Pete in the middle of the road, Clark, and he says, you have to stop doing what you're doing, and the street racing, you're putting yourself and people in danger. I will physically stop you every time if I have to. And Pete throws his hands in the air and says, okay, I guess there's nothing I can do to stop you. And he says, I guess I'll just live vicariously through you. I really like that in the same episode where Jonathan Kent has a speech about how Clark may not always be able to 100% hold to his principles, that sometimes you have to compromise, moral compromise. Even Captain America says in Winter Soldier, sometimes you have to have a little bit of that moral compromise for the greater good. We also have Superman, Clark, struggling with the ways in which he is physically superior to people, more powerful than people, that in trying to do the right thing, he can accidentally come off as an oppressive dictator. He doesn't want to run people's lives and tell them what to do and be the moral arbiter for everything. But he also thinks that if he doesn't do that, Pete is going to get hurt. So he basically has to be, for lack of a better word, a Nazi to Pete. He has to be a dictator and strong-arm him. And these are the kinds of stories that I really that I like the most with Superman. Not the like purely action adventure. What could you do to physically stop Superman? How is he? How can we be afraid for his life at all when he has the powers he has? That stuff's not interesting. What's really interesting is Superman with his powers fully intact, having to try to hang on to his principles, the truth and justice of it all. So I feel like the sheriff is just having a bad day, because she comes in and she tells Clark, look, I'm going to give you a pass on this one, even though we didn't find anything, because we've been after this Dante guy for a while, and she calls him a slippery fish. And then she says, but next time, I better see some rain. And I'm like, well, okay, but you're pretty sure you know what happened here. But to be fair, she's really sick of Clark taking the law into his own hands and being at crime scenes. And that is a relationship that I wish we'd done more with down later on. I think it would have been really cool if... I don't mean for this to be my answer to everything. I think it would be really cool if she found out his secret at some point and had to keep it. But yeah, what I meant to say earlier is I just like the kind of moral quagmire of being, ultra powerful and nothing can hurt you, and having to try to, figure out how to not, accidentally run people's lives for them. So Pete, I realize that he is, beat up and hurt and afraid that he's about to lose his life over the 20 grand, but that is a really out of character kind of dramatic entrance for him. Maybe he did that to emphasize how urgent and horrifying the situation is, to try to convince him to go get him the 20,000 somehow. So it's really sad that Pete, knowing Clark's secret, we couldn't come up with a cool story to tell about that if we're going to give him an episode. And later on in the season, we're going to deal with that more, and he's going to get tortured and have a hard time handling it, and then he's going to leave the series. But here, it's just about how he's in danger, and he's the victim now, and Clark needs to drop everything and do whatever it takes to save him. And he's... some people aren't going to agree with this, but he comes off as really selfish to me through this whole episode, and I think that's the reason a lot of people don't like this. I get that he's desperate, but it's hard, again, to sympathize with him because of how kind of idiotic he was about everything at the beginning of the episode, when he was warned repeatedly by Clark, who was being very reasonable in what he was saying, even if arguably strong-arming him was not the right thing to do. But I do like that it puts Clark in this position where he has to decide just how far over the line he's going to go. And the compromise he makes, I think, is a good one, although I'm confused about Lex's side of it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. He really enjoyed those Westerns. But I like that Clark finds this kind of middle road, where instead of... going Watergate on an ATM or whatever, like they were talking about earlier, where he just steals a bunch of money. I mean, Pete is so desperate, he goes as far as to say, just put on a red kryptonite ring. I wish I liked the writing and getting us there better, because I want to like his desperation and getting that far, and it just doesn't quite play for me. But I kind of like the idea of getting to that place in a vacuum where Clark has accidentally sort of created this monster where he's let somebody in and told him his secret, and he's bordering, and Pete, the guy who knows the secret, is bordering on taking advantage of Clark's powers and abusing that. So Lex says, no, I'm not going to give you 20 grand, and he has a really good reason for it when he says that these kind of sharks will just keep coming back for more. You give them the money, and now they think they own you, and they're just going to keep coming back to get more from you. Well, he leaves his keys, and he seems to do that really deliberately. The first time I saw this episode, I thought this. By the way, I don't know why Lex has 2 X's on his license plate. I don't know what the significance of 20 is. But anyway, so he leaves his Porsche keys. Clark would know full well, of course, that a Porsche is worth more than 20 grand. And he takes the keys, and he... I'm just reminded of that line that Pete had when he was under an influence in the first season. Give me the damn keys! Anyway, he takes the Porsche, and in the moment I was thinking, okay, there's this unspoken understanding between Clark and Lex where they're never going to talk about this, but Lex is trying to help him out without going as far as to actually hand him 20 grand. There would be questions. Where did that come from? Why did you give that much money away? It's untaxed. Whatever. I could see him not wanting to do that, maybe. It's going to maybe turn out later that Lex actually didn't intend to give him the keys, or maybe he's just, at the end when he asks Clark about it, he's just toying with him and curious to see if Clark will actually admit that he did it, because he wants to see just how close their friendship is. I'm not sure. But it's weird the way it plays, because I can't tell if Lex did it on purpose, and I can't tell if Clark thinks he left the keys on purpose, but Lex is not a guy who is that careless with his stuff. He's deliberate about everything he does, and that scene at the end, it makes me simultaneously think that maybe he didn't do it on purpose, and also that maybe he did, or if he did, it was a ploy to kind of make a point about their friendship. I'm not sure. So this is really convenient, as it always is with Clark on Green Kryptonite, but this one especially so. The episode is totally over if that guy doesn't pick up a tank filled with kryptonite. And it's weird that Clark isn't hit by kryptonite as soon as he walks into that room, because there's a lot of it right there. And I don't know if those are lead tanks, and then when you pick it up, one part of it's not lead, so that's why he gets hit by it, or like maybe it's lead on top of a lead table. Probably not, though. We play obviously fast and loose with that constantly, with how much kryptonite hurts Clark in what way. We've talked about this a ton, of course, but also with how you can block it. Smallville's not the only thing that has that problem with Superman and kryptonite, of course. We'll get to the count later, but I didn't actually put in convenient unconsciousness. Usually what I mean by that is somebody who gets not conveniently unconscious so that Clark can use his powers without anybody seeing it. This is almost the reverse of that, where Clark himself is conveniently unconscious so that we can get to the climax here, and so that this can come off more thrilling. And now we're about to finally get our big car crash. And there's only one in this episode. You'd think that we'd have 7 or 8 in a story about car racing. So Pete's put Clark in this horribly precarious position where, even though he doesn't go as far as Pete wanted him to do, where he's just breaking into places and stealing money, Clark makes a big deal out of all of the parts of his moral code he's having to break. He has to lie, cheat, and steal. The 3 big kind of cardinal sins if you're Superman, I would say, or 3 of them. But the 4th thing is kill, and it's on accident, but they still both feel responsible. And that makes the whole thing even more of a downer and makes the stakes bigger, but what lessens that for me is that the main reason he has to die is not to put Pete and Clark in that kind of precarious situation. It's because, like with a lot of bad guys, we got to kill him off because he knows too much about what Clark can do. Potentially. I say that. I'm actually not sure that he witnessed any of Clark's powers. Maybe I'm wrong about that. It plays like that to me, though, where it's like, well, we can't have that guy running around after this. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he does die just to make, just so that it sinks in more for Pete. like how big of a mistake he made, so he'll never do anything like that again. When he comes back and has the stupid stretchy powers, it will seem like he did not learn a lot from this, if memory serves. I forget what exactly we do with him in that, but I remember it seeming like we backtracked from this some. We'll see when we eventually get there, if we get there. So we're inching along the escalation with Ian Somerhalder's character. And if memory serves, right after this, Lana's going to start trying to convict him because he kind of threatens her at the end of this. She's finding out too much about his background, and he can't have that. He's desperate, and he's worried, if memory serves, that the people that did this to him are going to find him. But yeah, this is one of those weird episodes where I think the sentiment behind it is a lot better than even the premise of the episode. Like, I never want to rewrite a thing. I suggested how the story they're trying to tell, I think, could have been told more effectively by just starting at the beginning with Pete already owing that guy money. But if I were writing this episode, I would start with that idea that Clark is going to have to make some really hard moral choices in order to help a friend, and try to write a story that's not just a carbon copy of a Fast and the Furious movie. The thematic and character ideas, there's merit in them. But we're ripping off other stuff in order to get there. What are those license plates back there? None of those are from stolen cars, are they? So yeah, the way he's... the cryptic way he's speaking here is really strange to me. I'm just not 100% sure what I'm supposed to take from this scene. If Lex meant for him to take the Porsche or not. And what he thought Clark was really going to do with it, too, if he did that on purpose. The way that scene is shot, it just looks like he does it on purpose. But at the end of this, we'll get that line. We'll talk about it in a second. Man, I really like the way this is lit on Lex's side. Often that can be the test of a true friendship. The question for me is, was Lex testing Clark somehow in doing that? Not in will he take the keys, but if he does take the keys, will he tell Lex about it? Is that what he's doing? I'm not sure. I'm grasping at straws a little bit. So we are going to deal with Jonathan's heart condition for the rest of the time he's on this show. And I will say it does get a little bit tedious, and he starts to look like another character we just don't have a lot of ideas left for, maybe, until we get to his running for office, that whole thing. One thing I like about Jonathan being taken out this episode and put in a hospital is that he's not there to guide Clark, so he's got to figure it out on his own. And his advice at the end is just do your best, basically. And I really like that he's not there to really help him out. I mean, Clark could go to him and talk to him in the hospital room, and I like that Clark doesn't bother him with it while he's trying to recover. But he's not there to like try to go with him and solve any of these problems. Because this is a situation that doesn't necessarily take superpowers. Ultimately, Clark's solution does require his powers. But if Jonathan had been... This just feels like a situation where Jonathan would have tried to solve this, you know, by himself with words. And I like that Clark is put in a position where he has to solve the kind of problem that you might see Jonathan Kent dealing with. If that makes any sense. This is not an overwritten speech. I think it's real down to earth. I like it a lot. There's moments in a vacuum in this that I really like. That's one of the better Jonathan Kent scenes of the season, maybe. And then this bit at the end where Pete talks about all the mistakes he's made and admits just how wrong he was. Not that he was wrong, not just that he was wrong, but just how wrong he was, is good, but I've lost a lot of respect for this character at this point. And then, right at the end, when Clark says, "I'm not playing basketball with you today," and he drops the ball and he leaves. In a vacuum, that is a really sad, tragic moment. And again, I like that the episode is willing to end on a downer like that. But, all things considered with the rest of the episode, it doesn't play the way it wants to, for me. Sam Jones' acting is great in the scene. I mean, he's not missing any opportunities he has to give a real performance. It's almost like he's auditioning every time he's on screen. Like, let me be a character in this show. Give me some stuff to do. Quit throwing me under the bus. I think we could have this exact scene in an episode that doesn't make me as unsympathetic with that character as I feel like I am here. And it's some of Welling's better acting this season, too. This is a nice cover. I don't mind this song. I don't know if I should count that as a walking away angry so much as a walking away, I don't know, lamenting or, you know, somberly or something. Do we buy that Pete has that classic car that looks like it should be in a car museum? I don't know. I don't know if we buy that. I mean, I guess his mother is a politician. Man, or just, you know, Cream Corn buys you some really nice cars. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the count now, shall we? We have quite a few things this time. We've got, like I said, some weird stuff that's kind of subverting expectations or turning things on its head a little bit, but still count in a category. So we have one, unless you count that thing at the end that I mentioned, we have one instance of somebody walking away angry, but it's actually Pete, and he's not walking, he's driving away angry when, in that scene where he says, "I guess I'll keep living vicariously through you," because nobody can stop Clark if he's going to use his superpowers. We have sort of a main character Kryptofreak. I hesitate to even count it with Pete, but he is effectively filling that role. We have an almost car crash at the beginning when Pete nearly hits Clark and Martha, but that's not a car crash. We finally get a real one at the end of the episode, and again, surprisingly, just the one. We don't have a parent kidnapping plot here, but we do have one parent who was in danger. I almost want to count that as a separate thing, or count that together with the kidnapping thing. but I guess it doesn't count, but I wrote it down. We have one instance of Clark on green kryptonite, unless you count his being in the car on the green kryptonite as 2. I would count it all as 1. Like I said, we got that car crash. We have one bad guy death. We have, like I said, I kind of want to count that convenient unconsciousness with Clark as that, because it's, again, convenient in the sense that it gets us right up to the wire of the bomb exploding. And this is a stretch. We have a sort of love triangle with Pete, Dante, and Dante's girlfriend. I'm fussy on whether Pete knew that that was Dante's girlfriend when she kept making out with him and wishing him luck and stuff earlier in the episode, so not sure about that. Anyway, not anything to ask Jor-El when we get to heaven, except for that whole thing with the keys. Did Lex intentionally leave the keys there or not? I guess that is the thing that I would ask Jor-El when I get to heaven. Anyway, this one is a straight up 2 out of 4 to me. It's a real mixed bag, and I think I walked into this expecting to give it even a lower rating than that, because I always remember kind of loathing this episode. It is too well made to give it a 2, or to give it less than a 2, but I think it's too unfair to Pete and makes him too much of a guest star in a show where he is supposed to be one of the central supporting characters to go more than a 2. And also, I just don't care about the other subplots the way they're being handled at the moment. Next time, we are gonna do, let's see, what is the next episode? It is... Oh, it's the first episode with Alicia. What is that called? So I know there's a lot of folks that like her. It's been a long time, so we'll see how I feel about it this time. I always really kind of detested that character. We'll see what that's like going back to it. Obsession is the name of this episode. Also, the name of a original series Star Trek episode that I like quite a bit. But this one will be about Clark being obsessed with an attractive Kryptofreak instead of being obsessed with a giant cloud that he feels like he should have killed when he had a chance, like Captain Kirk. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you had a good time with me. Leave your comments. Let me know what you think about this episode. I'm going to try to get back on the swing of these. I'm going to put them out as often as humanly possible. Please let me know if you want to see more of this. And in the meantime, I was Captain Logan, and I'll see you again soon. Bye, folks.